Put a smile on your face when you're moving from place to place. Good morning, good morning, morning.
Welcome back to the morning show on Tobago Updates Television. I am Adanna Combie, and we begin our conversations with our guest. This morning we're speaking with Darius Figuera, a criminologist, and we are talking about the recent crime surge in Trinidad and Tobago and how do we get a grip on this. This is from the perspective of a criminologist. Darius, good morning.
Good morning, ma'am. Thank you for having me.
Good morning and welcome. Thank you for gracing us. We have noticed, of course, it's evident that there is a surge and increase in criminal activity in Trinidad and Tobago. There have been cries, we've been having conversations about this issue. We've spoken to so many people and gotten so many perspectives on the issue as it stands, you know, the increase, especially coming down to the end of last year and into early January, where we saw a lot of criminal activities taking place. And as I said, everybody brought in their perspective. The police, we have spoken with TTPS, we have spoken with many persons as it relates to this crime surge. And are we speaking to you, a criminologist, to get your perspective on what you think the cause is, one, and how do we get a grip of this and how do we nip it? Well, I'm not even sure if it's in the bud right now at the stage it's at, but how do we get a grip of what is taking place?
Thank you. If you would allow me, I would like to be Tobago-centric this morning to speak to the reality of crime and criminality in Tobago and then put it in the context of Trinidad and Tobago, because we continue to make this grave mistake by insisting that what is happening in Tobago is in fact imported from Trinidad. And we are therefore failing to understand the distinctive nature of the terrain of Tobago. And because of its distinctive nature, it will evolve in a pattern that will be different from Trinidad. So therefore, policing methods that are devised in Trinidad cannot be imported whole scale and applied to Tobago. Your policing methodology has to be adapted to the reality of Tobago on the ground that is constantly changing. So that is the first reality the people of Trinidad of Tobago must understand, that there are distinctive features of what is evolving in Tobago. So for example, let me give your viewers and listeners examples of this. In the early days, we always had this position that all things illicitly are moving from Trinidad to Tobago via the ferries. And there has been a constant call for increasing the surveillance and the interdiction efforts on the ferry system to interdict the illicit drugs, the weapons, etc., moving from Trinidad to Tobago. What we must now understand is that the illicit trades of the Caribbean are constantly evolving. Nothing stands still. And it has evolved to the point in Tobago where illicit drugs, guns, and other commodities and personnel are moving into Tobago via the ports of the landing points of Tobago that has nothing to do with the ferry system. So whilst you have pipelines that continue to use the ferry system, you have pipelines that have much greater volume capacity in existence today, that this pipeline has integrated Tobago into it, that carries much more volume than the ferries. So if you shut down the ferries, that will make no difference because the pipelines exists with the landing points on the beaches, and you have the coastal transporter system where the boats leave the beaches, meet the mother boats out in the deep sea, and transport the commodities, illegal, illicit commodities, onshore Tobago. That is one example.
I understand. Might I interject? I understand what you're saying, but I'm not sure that I agree if you said if we shut down the ferry that it will make no difference. It will make some measure of difference, because I'm thinking that that is a measure of import as well. I mean, it might not make a significant difference in terms of what the direction in which you're going, but to me, it does make a difference if those ports of entries are under heavy surveillance. I do believe that it will make a difference.
They must be under heavy surveillance, but the reality I am painting is that that is not the only point of entry. Transnational organized crime always prepares a menu of alternate methodologies to ensure that when you shut down 1, 2, 3, and 4 fall into place. So they never put all their eggs in a single basket. And in the case of Tobago, you now have multiple eggs in multiple baskets. And the trafficking pipeline that is moving from South America to islands up the island chain as far as Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic. And this pipeline, Tobago is now integrated into. The volume that moves on this pipeline dwarfs what comes over on the ferries, and also the persons who utilize the ferries are easily expendable and replaceable in the trade. So they can be given up and the trade continues.
All right, so this is happening. This is happening, right? Of course, from your analytics and your professional expertise in criminology. So what we're trying to figure out now, how do we get a grip? How do we intercept these activities, and how do we bring crime to reduce the level of crime so that we can restore confidence, so that we can live comfortably, peacefully in our communities as we focus in here in Tobago, because we have to put some measures in place. You're talking about getting a grip. You've exposed the ports of entries, the possibilities of these things happening here in Tobago, how they enter. But what we want to talk about this morning is how do we interject, and cause a reduction in criminal activities taking place in and around the Tobago, wherever they come from. If they don't come from the ferry, wherever they land, as you call it, these places, wherever they land, how do we, what are the things we need to put in place from today to ensure criminal activities are at bay so that we can live comfortably in sweet Tobago?
But what we must first understand is that in order to engage with the terrain, you have to understand it. Because you cannot engage with a terrain that has been created by transnational organized crime and it continues to evolve. And you don't understand this relationship between the terrain and the activities of transnational organized crime, and you refuse to understand that gangland in Trinidad and Tobago is the creation of transnational organized crime, and it serves transnational organized crime. So let me give you another reality of Tobago that has to be understood. Anytime the tourism plant in Tobago expands, develops, and the volume of airlift seats to Europe explode, and it approaches and surpasses that volume of seats that existed in the late 1990s and early 21st century. What kicks on immediately then is a business model to now export illicit drugs to Europe from Tobago via this airlift, swallowers, mules, and utilizing the body of the aircraft. When that kicks on, an entire new terrain of crime and criminality emerges because you have to bring in the swallowers, bring in the mules, bring in the product, load them up, put them on the flights, and you get a whole series of predatory behavior that follows that business model. So that now is another reality that has to be taken care of by creating capacity for when that day arrives. Because you cannot afford to play catch up with that.
So you close off a port, then one reopens. It's as if they are thinking 10 steps ahead. So you close one off, and then another one opens.
Yes, because you see, they were already doing it from Tobago in the second half of the 1990s and the first 5 years of the 21st century. The business model was already put on the ground in Tobago and utilized Tobago. What stymied the business model was when the volume of airlift fell dramatically and the tourism industry went into abeyance. So these people believe firmly in strategic planning, and they believe firmly in the fail-safe method, where you must always create ongoing replacements for a methodology that goes redundant. So they believe in built-in redundancies. So that means for us to counter, we have to understand what is going on the ground, and we have to then create capacity to constantly evolve to counter the threats as they arise. So we cannot wait for the threat to arise to then hopefully react. So when we saw the nature of the violence in Tobago change, this is a direct result of what is going on in Trinidad and Tobago, bleeding over into Tobago. In Trinidad, bleeding into Tobago. What is happening in Tobago is that there is a presence now in Tobago that is jostling, looking to control turf. They're looking to mark out and control turf because they are preparing for the day when the major illicit business of Tobago will kick back on with the volume that they are hoping for. Because in the Caribbean today, the number one illicit industry is moving product to Europe.
So, Mr. Figuera, basically what you're saying is that we need to take a page from somebody's book and start to have strategies in place. We need to start thinking ahead, so that we don't have to always be reactive, but we can be proactive with some things so that we are prepared for when things happen. So this takes a measure of research, a measure of doing some due diligence and ensuring that we understand how things move around in our spaces. I want to say thank you this morning for coming here and, breaking this down in this way to us, because sometimes we only look at what is happening and not how it happens. So we want to thank you so much for bringing that perspective to us, right? We want to thank you as a criminologist for sharing your expert analysis of how things happen and how things move, and also for starting the conversation of strategizing. Also starting the conversation of planning ahead and understanding how things happen in our space so that we can be prepared. In closing, is there anything you want to say to our public?
Well, what has to happen is that immediately we have to put in place the capacity at the airport, the capacity at the port, awaiting the wave that is to come. And the national security apparatus has to now seriously consider raising the level of engagement of the Coast Guard and the military and the groups within the TTPS charged with transnational organized crime and the drug trade for a presence in operational presence in Tobago that responds to the threat that is posed.
Definitely gonna have to start putting those things in place to intercept and intercede on behalf of the population of Trinidad and Tobago for our safety again. Thank you so much, Mr. Darius Figuera, for coming on this morning and sharing your insight with us. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been speaking to Darius Figuera, criminologist, as we speak about a grip on crime, the crime surge in Trinidad and Tobago. We want you to stay with us as we continue our programming. We're going to go for a short break, but we have our next guest in studio. We're going to have that conversation as soon as we get back. But of course, as we go to the break, we invite you to share the live, share the live, share the live. We'll be right back.